Captain Maddox Corinth watched the tactical display with the cold calculation of a man who had already died twice. The holographic projection showed 847 enemy vessels arranged in a perfect sphere around his ship, the Defiance Edge, humanity's last remaining warship. Each red dot represented a Velthari dreadnought, their bioorganic hulls pulsing with malevolent energy signatures that made his teeth ache. "Sir, they're hailing us again," reported Lieutenant Vex Halloran from the communications station. Her voice carried the same hollow resignation that had infected the entire crew since Earth's final transmission went dark 3 days ago. Corinth's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the central display. The Velthari had been methodical in their conquest, systematic, patient, thorough. They'd shattered humanity's colonies one by one, harvesting entire populations for their bioships. The lucky ones died quickly. The others became part of the living vessels that now surrounded them, their neural patterns integrated into weapons systems that screamed with familiar voices. "Put them through," he ordered, though every fiber of his being recoiled from what he knew was coming. The air shimmered and War Prime Kethvala materialized before them. The Velthari commander's form was an abomination of organic and mechanical fusion, flowing tendrils of neural tissue wrapped around a skeletal frame of living metal. Where its face should have been, a cluster of human eyes blinked in synchronized patterns, pupils dilated with the chemical cocktail that kept harvested minds docile. "Captain of the prey ship," Kethvala spoke with the voice of a human child, the words distorted by the alien vocal cords. "Your species has provided excellent biomass for our expansion. Surrender now, and your crew will experience minimal suffering during integration." Corinth's jaw tightened. Through his neural link, he felt the terror radiating from his bridge crew. They'd all seen the intelligence reports from the outer colonies, the fusion chambers where humans were slowly dissolved and rebuilt into living components. The Velthari didn't just kill, they perverted, corrupted, made their victims complicit in their own destruction. "I've got a counter-offer," Corinth replied, his voice steady despite the chaos storm brewing in his enhanced neural cortex. "You can take your bioships and ram them straight into the nearest black hole." The clustered eyes blinked once, slowly. "Your defiance is noted and will be remembered during your processing. We detect 127 humans aboard your vessel. Their neural patterns show interesting stress formations: fear, desperation, grief. These emotions will enhance the ship minds we create from them." Lieutenant Commander Rorik Vanish, the ship's tactical officer, leaned forward in his chair. "Sir, we're picking up massive energy buildups across their fleet. They're charging primary weapons." Corinth nodded grimly. The Defiance Edge was a miracle of human engineering, a prototype fusion of Earth's most advanced technology with alien systems salvaged from a dozen conquered worlds. But against nearly 900 enemy vessels, it was a butterfly facing a hurricane. "Initiate Lazarus Protocol," he ordered quietly. The bridge fell silent. Even the ship's AI, Arya, seemed to pause before responding. "Captain, Lazarus Protocol will result in permanent neural damage to all crew members. Survival probability decreases too." "I know what it means," Corinth cut her off. His hand moved to the biosealed compartment built into his command chair. Inside lay a single crimson vial, the culmination of humanity's darkest research project. Project Lazarus had been developed in the final months before Earth's fall, when scientists realized that conventional warfare couldn't match the Velthari's biological advantages. The substance in the vial would rewrite human neural chemistry, temporarily unlocking the primitive rage centers that civilization had spent millennia suppressing. It would make them faster, stronger, more vicious, but at the cost of their humanity itself. "Sir," Halloran's voice was barely a whisper. "The outer colonies, they tried Lazarus on Kepler 442b. The entire population." "I know," Corinth said again. The survivors of Kepler 442b had torn each other apart in berserker fury, their enhanced aggression turning inward when no enemies remained. But that was a luxury the crew of the Defiance Edge wouldn't have to worry about. The Velthari formation began to tighten, their bioships undulating like sea creatures preparing to feed. Corinth could see the feeding ports opening along their hulls, ready to receive the liquefied remains of his crew. "All hands," he announced over the ship's intercom, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had made peace with damnation. "Prepare for Lazarus Protocol implementation. We're going to show these parasites what happens when you corner a species that conquered its own planet before it reached the stars." The vial felt warm in his palm, and Corinth allowed himself one last moment of clarity before humanity's final gambit began. The crimson liquid burned like molten metal as it entered Corinth's bloodstream through the neural interface ports at the base of his skull. Within seconds, his enhanced metabolism began processing the combat stimulants, and the world exploded into crystalline clarity. Every heartbeat of his crew registered in his awareness. Every micro-vibration of the ship's hull became a symphony of tactical information. The Lazarus compound didn't just enhance physical capabilities, it rewired the human brain's threat assessment protocols, stripping away the social conditioning that prevented humans from becoming the apex predators they'd once been. Corinth felt the change like a tidal wave of pure aggression washing over his consciousness. "Implement fleet-wide distribution," he commanded, his voice already carrying the low growl that marked Lazarus activation. Throughout the ship, emergency medical protocols kicked in, delivering the combat enhancement to every crew member simultaneously. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Lieutenant Halloran's pupils dilated to black pools as her hands began moving across the communications console with inhuman precision. Her nervous system, already enhanced by military-grade neural implants, began processing information at speeds that would have been impossible for an unmodified human brain. "Sir, I'm detecting something," she reported, her voice now carrying the same predatory undertone as her captain's. "The Velthari bioships are resonating at a frequency that matches human neural patterns. They're not just using our people as components, they're using them as processing cores." Corintha's enhanced cognitive abilities seized on the implication immediately. The Velthari weren't just harvesting humans for biological material. They were exploiting humanity's neural architecture as a form of living computer, using human consciousness itself to coordinate their fleet movements. "Vanish, full tactical analysis," he ordered. "I want to know exactly how they're networking those bioships." The tactical officer's fingers flew across his console, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to process targeting data at superhuman speeds. "Captain, they're using quantum-entangled neural tissue to link every ship in the formation. Each vessel contains approximately 150 human minds functioning as a distributed processing network." The horror of it hit Corinth like a physical blow. The Velthari weren't just using humans as weapons, they were using them as the central nervous system of their entire fleet. Every tactical decision, every coordinated movement, was being calculated by the enslaved minds of his own species. "They're trying to make us complicit in our own extinction," he growled, his enhanced emotional responses amplifying his rage to levels that would have been psychologically dangerous for an unmodified human. The enemy formation began to shift, the bioships moving with the fluid coordination of a single organism. Weapon ports opened along their living hulls, revealing the glowing energy conduits that fed directly into the neural cores where human minds writhed in electronic torment. "Incoming transmission," Halloran announced. It's coming from the bioships themselves." The holographic display flickered, and suddenly the bridge was filled with voices, hundreds of them, all human, all screaming in harmonious agony. The sounds formed words, barely recognizable through the distortion of alien vocal cords. "Help us, kill us, please, the pain, make it stop." Corintha's enhanced neural pathways processed the transmission with brutal efficiency. The Velthari were using the harvested humans as psychological warfare, broadcasting their suffering to demoralize any remaining resistance. But the Lazarus enhancement had stripped away his capacity for traditional emotional response, leaving only cold tactical analysis and primal fury. "Arya, activate the Morrison drive," he commanded. "Full power to all weapon systems." The ship's AI hesitated for a nanosecond, an eternity in digital terms. "Captain, the Morrison drive is an experimental system. At full power it will—" "I know what it will do," Corinth snarled. The Morrison drive was humanity's attempt to weaponize the quantum foam that existed between dimensions, creating localized tears in spacetime that could theoretically destroy matter at the subatomic level. It had never been tested in combat, and the energy requirements were so massive that firing it would leave the Defiant's edge completely defenseless. But Corintha's enhanced tactical awareness had already identified the critical flaw in the Velthari formation. Their bioships were quantum-entangled, sharing information instantaneously across the entire fleet. That same connection could be used against them. "Sir, they're moving to attack formation," Vanish reported. "Estimate 30 seconds until they're in optimal firing position." The enemy ships began to pulse with synchronized energy, their bioweapon systems charging with power drawn from the neural cores of enslaved humans. Each vessel was a living nightmare, its hull writhing with the faces of the absorbed, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams of eternal torment. Corinth felt the Lazarus enhancement pushing his consciousness toward the edge of madness, but he embraced the chaos. In the space between sanity and berserker rage lay the kind of tactical thinking that had made humans the dominant species on a planet filled with creatures designed to kill them. "Target the quantum resonance node on the primary command vessel," he ordered. "One shot, maximum penetration." The Defiant's edge shuddered as every available power cell was diverted to the Morrison drive. The weapon's charging sequence created a harmonic vibration that resonated through the ship's hull, and Corinth could feel the reality around them beginning to warp as the drive tapped into the quantum substrate of spacetime itself. The Velthari formation tightened, their bioships preparing to unleash a coordinated barrage that would reduce the human vessel to its component atoms. But they had made one critical error. They had underestimated what a species capable of its own destruction might be willing to sacrifice to take its enemies with it. "Firing Morrison drive," Corinth announced, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to process the tactical situation in the microseconds before the weapon discharged. The universe screamed. The Morrison drive's discharge tore through local spacetime like a cancer, creating a ripple of quantum destruction that propagated outward from the Defiant's edge at speeds that made light seem sluggish. The experimental weapon didn't just destroy matter. It unraveled the fundamental forces that held atoms together, creating an expanding sphere of absolute void where the laws of physics temporarily ceased to function. The Velthari command vessel, a massive bioship the size of a small moon, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, its hull writhing with the faces of 100,000 enslaved humans, and the next it was gone, not destroyed but deleted from reality itself. But the quantum entanglement that linked the Velthari fleet turned humanity's victory into a Pyrrhic nightmare. The destruction of the command vessel sent a cascade of neural feedback through every connected bioship, and Corinth watched in horror as the agonized screams of the enslaved humans amplified across the entire formation. "Jesus Christ," Vanish whispered, his enhanced hearing picking up the death screams of nearly 1,000,000 human minds as they were torn apart by the quantum backlash. "What have we done?" Corinth felt the Lazarus enhancement fighting against his natural human empathy, but even the combat stimulants couldn't completely suppress the weight of what they'd just unleashed. The enslaved humans weren't just dying, they were being erased from existence, their consciousness scattered across dimensions where suffering might continue indefinitely. "Sir, massive energy signatures across the enemy fleet," Halloran reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. They're doing something to the remaining neural cores." The tactical display showed the surviving Velthari vessels beginning to pulse with malevolent energy. Instead of retreating or regrouping, they were accelerating their biointegration processes, force-feeding the remaining human minds with combat stimulants and neural enhancers that would burn out their consciousness in minutes. "They're turning the survivors into living weapons," Corinth realized with growing horror. "They're going to kill every human mind in their fleet and use the neural energy as a weapon discharge." The enemy ships began to change, their bioorganic hulls swelling as the neural cores were pushed beyond their limits. The faces visible on their surfaces contorted in agony as the enslaved humans were literally consumed by the conversion process, their life force being channeled into the ship's weapon systems. Arya's voice crackled through the ship's communication system, distorted by the quantum interference still radiating from the Morrison drive's discharge point. "Captain, the Morrison drive is offline. Core temperature is approaching critical levels, and we have cascade failures in the primary power grid." Corinth's enhanced tactical awareness processed the situation with brutal clarity. The Defiant's edge was effectively defenseless, its primary weapon system destroyed by its own discharge. The surviving Velthari vessels, still nearly 800 strong, were preparing to unleash an attack powered by the death screams of humanity's enslaved children. "All hands prepare for impact," he ordered, his voice carrying across the ship's internal communication system. "Emergency power to shields and structural integrity fields. If we're going down, we're taking as many of these bastards with us as possible." The crew responded with the fluid coordination of humans pushed beyond their biological limits. The Lazarus enhancement had stripped away their capacity for fear, replacing it with a cold, calculating fury that made them more dangerous than any natural predator. But even enhanced humans couldn't survive what was coming. The first wave of bioships opened fire, their weapons discharging streams of pure neural energy, the crystallized agony of 1,000,000 dying minds converted into destructive force. The energy beams struck the Defiant's edge's shields with the intensity of a small star, and Corinth felt the ship's hull plates beginning to buckle under the assault. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, Vanish reported with mechanical precision. "Structural integrity field is failing. We've got maybe 2 minutes before complete hull failure." Corinth's enhanced cognitive abilities raced through the tactical options available to them. The ship's conventional weapons were useless against the Velthari bioships, and their defensive systems were being systematically overwhelmed. But the Lazarus enhancement had unlocked something in his mind, a tactical awareness that went beyond conventional military training. "Arya, can you interface directly with the ship's neural network?" he asked, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle damage reports and emergency klaxons. "Affirmative, Captain. However, direct neural interface with the ship's systems will result in permanent brain damage. The data transfer rates required would." "Do it," Corinth ordered, already moving toward the captain's chair. The seat was equipped with full neural interface capabilities, designed to allow the commanding officer to directly control the ship's systems in emergency situations. It had never been tested with a human brain enhanced by Lazarus protocol. The neural connection established itself with a surge of pain that would have killed an unmodified human. Corinth felt his consciousness exploding outward, his awareness suddenly encompassing every system on the Defiant's edge. He could feel the ship's pain as the enemy weapons tore through its hull, could sense the terror of his crew as they fought to keep the vessel operational. But he could also feel something else, the quantum resonance field still radiating from the Morrison drive's discharge point. The weapon had torn a hole in space-time, and that hole was still there, still hungry, still capable of consuming matter and energy. Corinth's enhanced tactical awareness seized on the possibility with predatory intensity. If he could maneuver the ship into the quantum resonance field, the resulting explosion would create a chain reaction that would tear through local space-time, potentially destroying every Velthari vessel in the formation. It would also mean the certain death of every human aboard the Defiant's edge. "All hands," he announced, his voice now carrying the harmonic distortion of a man whose neural patterns were being integrated with a starship's computer core. "Prepare for final gambit. We're going to show these parasites what happens when you threaten a species that learned to split atoms before it learned to split the difference." The ship began to move, its engines straining against the gravitational distortions created by the quantum resonance field. Around them, the Velthari bioships intensified their assault, their weapons now powered by the death energy of every human mind they had enslaved. The universe held its breath as humanity's last ship dove toward oblivion, carrying with it the hopes and rage of an entire species. The neural interface burned through Corinth's consciousness like liquid fire, but the Lazarus enhancement kept him functional even as his brain tissue began to cook from the data transfer rates. Through the ship's sensors, he could perceive the quantum resonance field as a writhing mass of twisted space-time, its edges crackling with energy that existed in dimensions human mathematics couldn't properly describe. The Velthari formation was converging on their position, the bioships moving with desperate urgency as their commanders realized what the human captain intended. But their quantum-entangled coordination network, designed to be their greatest tactical advantage, now worked against them. Every ship had to maintain its connection to the neural cores, limiting their maneuverability and trapping them in predictable movement patterns. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Velthari fleet commander," Halloran reported, her voice distorted by the electromagnetic interference radiating from the quantum field. They're trying to negotiate." Corinth's consciousness, now distributed across the ship's entire sensor network, processed the incoming communication within human efficiency. Warprime Kethvala appeared on the bridge's holographic display, but its form was flickering and unstable, the quantum resonance interfering with the projection protocols. "Human captain," the alien spoke with the voices of 1,000 enslaved children, "your species has demonstrated tactical capabilities we did not anticipate. We are prepared to offer terms for your surrender." Through the neural link, Corinth felt his crew's enhanced emotional responses, pure, undiluted rage at the suggestion that they might negotiate with the creatures that had turned their species into living weapons. The Lazarus enhancement had stripped away their capacity for mercy, leaving only the primal fury of cornered predators. "Here are my terms," Corinth replied, his voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of the ship's computer core. "You can die quickly or you can die slowly. Those are your only options." The Velthari commander's clustered eyes blinked in patterns that suggested confusion. "Your vessel cannot survive proximity to the quantum anomaly. You will achieve nothing but the destruction of your own crew." Corinth's enhanced tactical awareness had already calculated the precise angles and velocities required to maximize the chain reaction. The quantum resonance field was unstable, but it could be triggered to collapse in a specific pattern that would create a cascade failure across local spacetime. The resulting explosion would be visible from neighboring star systems. "You made one critical error," he told the alien commander. "You assumed we valued our own survival more than your destruction. The Defiant's edge shuddered as its engines pushed beyond their design limits, diving deeper into the quantum field's influence. Reality began to warp around the ship, time flowing at different rates in different sections of the hull. Corinth felt crew members aging years in seconds, their enhanced metabolism struggling to adapt to the temporal distortions. The Velthari bioships opened fire with everything they had, their weapons now discharging streams of pure death energy extracted from the neural cores. The Defiant's edge's shields failed completely, and the enemy beams began tearing through the ship's hull with devastating efficiency. "Hull breaches on all decks," Vanish reported, his voice mechanically calm despite the chaos around him. "Life support is failing. We have maybe 90 seconds before complete structural collapse." But 90 seconds was enough. Corinth's consciousness, now fully integrated with the ship's tactical systems, began the final sequence. The Defiant's edge wasn't just diving toward the quantum anomaly, it was positioning itself to create the perfect resonance cascade, one that would tear through the fabric of space-time itself. The first bioship was caught in the edge of the quantum field, and Corinth watched with savage satisfaction as the alien vessel simply stopped. Its hull froze in time, its bioorganic components locked in stasis while the quantum forces began unraveling its molecular structure. "Sir, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations," Halloran announced. "The field is expanding. The Velthari ships are trying to retreat, but..." "Too late," Corinth growled, his enhanced awareness tracking the movements of every enemy vessel. The quantum field was expanding exponentially, its edges moving at speeds that made conventional faster-than-light travel seem trivial. The Velthari fleet was trapped, their bioships caught in a web of twisted space-time that was rapidly becoming unsurvivable. The enemy vessels began to die in ways that defied description. Some simply ceased to exist, their quantum signatures erased from reality. Others were caught in temporal loops, experiencing their destruction over and over again in infinite recursion. A few were twisted into impossible geometries, their three-dimensional forms compressed into spaces that existed only in mathematical theory. But the most satisfying deaths were the ones that liberated the enslaved humans. As each bioship was consumed by the quantum anomaly, the neural cores were disconnected from the Velthari control networks. For a brief moment before annihilation, the imprisoned minds were free, and Corinth could hear their voices through the ship's communication system, not screaming in agony but singing in triumph. "We did it," Lieutenant Commander Vanish whispered, his enhanced senses tracking the destruction of the enemy fleet. "We actually did it. 800 ships, all of them gone." Corinth felt the Defiant's edge beginning to break apart around him, its hull plates separating as the quantum forces tore through the ship's structural integrity. His neural interface was burning out, his consciousness fragmenting as the connection to the ship's computer core overloaded his enhanced brain. But through the chaos he could sense something else, a massive energy signature approaching from the edge of the system. The quantum cascade had sent out ripples through subspace, and something was responding to the disturbance. "Captain," Arya's voice crackled through the failing communication system, "I'm detecting multiple inbound contacts. They're not Velthari." Corinth's fragmented consciousness seized on the sensor data with desperate hope. The approaching vessels were broadcasting identification codes he recognized, human codes but not from any Earth-built ships. These were vessels from the outer colonies, the settlements that had supposedly been destroyed in the early phases of the war. "They're alive," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the ship's death throes. "Some of them survived." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Defiant's edge wasn't humanity's last ship after all. Somewhere in the outer darkness, human colonies had survived, had built new vessels, had been waiting for the right moment to strike back against their oppressors. The quantum cascade had been their signal, a beacon of defiance that had reached across the void to summon humanity's survivors. As the Defiant's edge fell apart around him, Corinth felt something he hadn't experienced since the Lazarus enhancement: hope. The approaching human fleet materialized from the quantum distortions like ghosts returning from the grave. 47 vessels of designs Corinth had never seen before, their hulls bearing the scars of desperate battles fought in the outer darkness where Earth's refugees had been hiding. Each ship broadcasted identification codes from colonies that had been presumed dead: New Geneva, Kepler Station, the mining platforms of the Arcturus Belt. "This is Admiral Nix Ravencrest of the Colonial Defense Force," came the transmission, the voice carrying the same enhanced harmonics that marked Lazarus protocol usage. "We're moving to assist. Hold position if you can." Corinth's fragmented consciousness struggled to process the implications. The outer colonies hadn't been destroyed, they'd been hiding, rebuilding, preparing for this moment. The quantum cascade had been their signal, the beacon that brought them out of the void to strike at the heart of the Velthari expansion. But even as hope flared in his dying mind, tactical analysis revealed the brutal mathematics of the situation. The Velthari had deployed over 2,000 additional vessels to the system, massive bioships that dwarfed even the largest human dreadnoughts. The colonial fleet was outnumbered 50 to 1, and their ships showed signs of hasty construction and jury-rigged weapon systems. "Admiral," Corinth transmitted, his voice barely coherent through the failing neural interface, "it's a trap. They were waiting for reinforcements. The entire system is surrounded." The response came back with the cold fury of enhanced humans pushed beyond their limits. "We know, Captain. We've been tracking their movements for months. This is humanity's last chance. We either break them here or our species dies with us." The Velthari response was immediate and overwhelming. Bioships emerged from behind moons and asteroid fields, their hulls pulsing with the neural energy of enslaved populations from a dozen worlds. Each vessel was a living nightmare, its consciousness derived from the forcibly integrated minds of entire species the Velthari had consumed in their expansion across the galaxy. The colonial fleet spread into attack formation, their vessels moving with the fluid coordination of crews enhanced by Lazarus Protocol. But Corinth could see the modifications they'd made to their ships, weapon systems that pulsed with the same bioorganic energy as the Velthari vessels, armor plating that writhed with neural tissue, engines that screamed with the voices of the voluntarily integrated. "My God," he whispered, understanding finally dawning. "They've been experimenting on themselves." The first exchange of fire lit up the system like a newborn star. The colonial ships opened with weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself, their bio-enhanced systems channeling the voluntary consciousness of human volunteers into destructive energy. The Velthari responded with their own neural weapons, streams of enslaved agony that could burn through conventional armor like acid. The CDF destroyer Vengeance of Kepler took a direct hit from a Velthari dreadnought, its hull splitting open to reveal the bioorganic modifications within. But instead of dying, the ship's crew began to merge with their vessel, their consciousness integrating with the living systems to create something new, a hybrid of human determination and alien biotechnology. Corinth watched in fascination and horror as human ships began to transform mid-battle, their crews making the ultimate sacrifice to become one with their vessels. The destroyer became a living entity, its hull pulsing with human neural patterns as it rammed into the Velthari dreadnought, both ships exploding in a cascade of biological and technological destruction. "All ships, implement Phoenix Protocol," Admiral Ravencrest commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had already accepted death. "Voluntary integration authorized. Show these parasites what happens when humans choose their own evolution." The battle became a nightmare of biological warfare as human ships began to transform. Crews integrated with their vessels, becoming hybrid entities that combined human consciousness with alien biotechnology. The results were both beautiful and terrifying, ships that fought with the cunning of human tacticians and the biological advantages of the Velthari, but powered by the voluntary sacrifice of their crews rather than enslaved minds. The colonial cruiser New Geneva's Pride took on 3 Velthari bioships simultaneously, its hull exploding outward as the crew merged with the ship's systems. The vessel became a living weapon, its consciousness distributed across every system as it tore through the enemy formation with weapons that channeled pure human rage. But the Velthari adapted quickly. Their bioships began to change as well, their enslaved neural cores being pushed beyond their limits to match the power output of the voluntarily integrated humans. The space around the battle zone became a churning mass of bioorganic energy, reality itself warping under the strain of consciousness-powered weapons. The casualty reports came in streams of data that Corinth's failing neural interface could barely process. The colonial fleet was being systematically destroyed, their ships falling one by one to the overwhelming numbers of the Velthari armada. But each human vessel took dozens of enemy ships with it, their crews fighting with the desperation of a species facing extinction. "Sir," came a transmission from one of the surviving colonial ships, "we're detecting massive quantum signatures from your position. The resonance field is still expanding. If we can channel it." The transmission cut off as the ship was consumed by Velthari neural fire, its integrated crew dying in agony as their consciousness was torn apart by the enemy weapons. But the idea had been planted. The quantum resonance field created by the Morrison drive was still active, still growing, still capable of unraveling the fabric of spacetime itself. Corinth's enhanced tactical awareness seized on the possibility with desperate hope. If the surviving colonial ships could coordinate their bio-enhanced weapons with the quantum field, They might be able to create a cascade reaction that would tear through the entire Velthari fleet. But it would require a level of coordination that had never been attempted before. Dozens of voluntarily integrated human consciousness working together to manipulate forces that existed beyond conventional physics. As the Defiant's edge continued its death spiral into the quantum anomaly, Corinth prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, adding his own consciousness to the collective effort that might save what remained of humanity. The universe screamed as human determination met alien hunger in a battle that would determine the fate of both species. The quantum resonance field had become a churning maelstrom of twisted space-time, its edges crackling with energy that existed in dimensions human science couldn't properly catalog. As the Defiant's edge spiraled toward its core, Corinth felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his dying body, his neural patterns beginning to merge with the fundamental forces that held reality together. Through the ship's failing sensors, he watched the colonial fleet make their final stand. 17 vessels remained operational, their crews now fully integrated with their bio-enhanced systems, fighting as hybrid entities that combined human tactical thinking with alien biotechnology. Each ship was a living organism, its consciousness distributed across weapon systems that channeled the voluntary sacrifice of their crews into destructive energy. All remaining vessels converge on the quantum anomaly, Admiral Ravencrest commanded, her voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of someone whose consciousness had been distributed across multiple systems. We're going to use the field as a weapon. Every ship, every crew, every consciousness, everything we have left. The Velthari response was immediate and desperate. Their bioships began to swarm toward the quantum field, their enslaved neural cores pushed beyond their limits in a final attempt to prevent the humans from weaponizing the anomaly. The space around the battle zone became a nightmare of competing energies as consciousness-powered weapons clashed in ways that defied physical law. Corinth felt his enhanced awareness expanding as his neural patterns began to synchronize with the quantum field itself. The Morrison drive's discharge had torn a hole in the fabric of reality, and that hole was hungry for energy, for matter, for the conscious observation that gave meaning to existence itself. "Captain," came a transmission from the colonial battleship Arcturus Defiant, "we're reading massive neural resonance from your position. Your consciousness is integrating with the quantum field. We can use that as a focal point for our weapons." The implications hit Corinth like a physical blow. His dying brain, enhanced by Lazarus Protocol and integrated with the ship's computer core, was becoming a conduit between human consciousness and the quantum forces that underpinned reality. He was becoming something new, not quite human, not quite alien, but a hybrid entity capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of existence. The Velthari seemed to sense the shift in the battle's momentum. Their bioships began to pulse with desperate energy, their enslaved neural cores being burned out in massive bursts of power designed to overwhelm the human defenses. The space around the quantum field became a writhing mass of bioorganic energy as the aliens threw everything they had at preventing the humans from completing their transformation. The colonial ship Kepler's Revenge took a direct hit from a Velthari superdreadnought, its hull splitting open to reveal the integrated crew within. But instead of dying, the ship's consciousness began to merge with the quantum field, its neural patterns joining with Corinth's expanding awareness to create something unprecedented. A collective human consciousness existing within the quantum foam of spacetime itself. "They're feeding the field," Corinth realized, his fragmented thoughts now distributed across multiple dimensions. Every ship, every crew, they're all becoming part of the weapon. The pattern became clear as more colonial vessels sacrificed themselves to the quantum anomaly. Each ship that entered the field added its crew's consciousness to the growing collective, their neural patterns becoming part of a vast network that existed within the quantum substrate of reality. They were creating something that had never existed before, a weapon powered by voluntary human consciousness, channeling the combined will of an entire species into a force capable of rewriting the laws of physics. The Velthari commander, Warprime Kethvala, appeared on the failing communication system, its form now flickering between dimensions as the quantum field began to affect the bioship structure. "What are you doing?" it demanded, its voice carrying the terror of a species that had never encountered anything like what the humans were creating. "We're showing you what happens when you threaten a species that learned to harness the power of stars before it learned to harness its own hatred," Corinth replied, his voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of the quantum field itself. The transformation was accelerating. The remaining colonial ships dove into the anomaly one by one, their crews adding their consciousness to the growing collective. Each integration expanded the network's capabilities, allowing them to manipulate quantum forces with increasing precision and power. The New Geneva's Pride was the last to enter the field, its captain transmitting a final message before the integration. For Earth. For our children. For every human mind they tried to enslave. As the ship's consciousness merged with the collective, Corinth felt the network reach critical mass. Hundreds of human minds, enhanced by Lazarus Protocol and voluntarily integrated with quantum bio technology, formed a distributed intelligence that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They had become something new, not quite human, not quite machine, but a hybrid entity capable of manipulating the fundamental forces that governed reality. The Velthari fleet, sensing the shift in power, began a desperate final assault. Over 1,500 bioships converged on the quantum anomaly, their weapons discharging streams of enslaved consciousness in a last-ditch attempt to overwhelm the human collective. The space around the battle zone became a churning maelstrom of competing energies as two entirely different forms of consciousness-based warfare clashed in ways that made conventional physics irrelevant. But the humans had one critical advantage: their integration was voluntary. Where the Velthari relied on enslaved minds torn from their bodies and forced into alien configurations, the human collective was powered by the willing sacrifice of beings who had chosen their own transformation. The difference in coherence and power was exponential. Corinth felt his consciousness expanding to encompass the entire quantum field, his awareness becoming the focal point through which the collective channeled their combined will. Through him, they began to reach out across spacetime itself, their influence spreading beyond the immediate battle zone to touch the very foundations of reality. Now, he whispered, his voice carrying across multiple dimensions as the human collective prepared to demonstrate what a species capable of splitting atoms, and willing to split its own consciousness, could accomplish when pushed to the edge of extinction. The quantum cascade erupted outward from the anomaly with the force of a controlled Big Bang, but this wasn't random destruction. It was conscious, directed, precise. The human collective, with Corinth as their focal point, wielded the fundamental forces of reality like a surgeon's scalpel, carving through the Velthari fleet with mathematical perfection. Each bioship died in a way specifically calculated to liberate the enslaved minds within. The quantum energy didn't simply destroy the alien vessels. It severed the neural connections that bound human consciousness to alien biotechnology, freeing millions of enslaved minds in the moments before their physical destruction. The space around the battle zone filled with the psychic echoes of liberation as human souls, trapped for years in bioorganic prisons, finally found release. Warprime Kethvala's flagship, a massive bioconstruct the size of a small planet, tried to retreat from the expanding quantum wave. But the human collective's consciousness had expanded beyond three-dimensional space, and they pursued the fleeing command ship through dimensions the Velthari couldn't even perceive. Your mistake, Corinth's voice resonated across multiple realities, was thinking that consciousness was something to be harvested. We're showing you that it's something to be transcended. The flagship's destruction was both beautiful and terrible. The quantum forces didn't simply tear it apart. They unraveled the very concept of its existence, erasing it from reality so completely that the universe forgot it had ever been. The enslaved minds within were liberated not just from their physical prison, but from the memory of their suffering, their consciousness free to join the cosmic background radiation as pure information. The cascade continued to expand, seeking out every Velthari bioship in the system with relentless precision. The alien fleet, designed to be the ultimate expression of biological warfare, found themselves facing an enemy that operated on principles they couldn't comprehend. The humans hadn't just weaponized quantum mechanics, they had weaponized the very concept of free will. As the last Velthari vessel was consumed by the expanding wave, Corinth felt the collective beginning to stabilize. The quantum field was contracting, its energy being absorbed and redirected by the network of human consciousness that had learned to exist within it. They had become something unprecedented, a distributed intelligence that could manipulate reality at the quantum level while maintaining the essential humanity that defined their species. Status report, he requested, his consciousness now expanded across multiple dimensions but still fundamentally human in its patterns of thought. The response came from dozens of integrated minds simultaneously. All Velthari vessels in the system have been neutralized. We're detecting quantum signatures from their home systems. The cascade has propagated through their bionetwork, liberating enslaved populations across their entire empire. The implications were staggering. The Velthari's greatest strength, their quantum-entangled bionetwork, had become the vector for their complete destruction. The liberation wave had spread through every connected system, freeing enslaved minds and destroying bioships across hundreds of light years. But the victory came at a cost that would have been unthinkable before the war began. The human collective existed in a state between life and death, their consciousness distributed across quantum dimensions in ways that made traditional concepts of individuality meaningless. They had saved their species by transcending it, becoming something new and strange and wonderful. The colonies? Corinth asked, his thoughts touching the minds of his integrated companions. What about the survivors? Admiral Ravencrest's consciousness responded from within the collective network, her identity still distinct despite their merged existence. We've located 17 intact human settlements in the outer systems. The Velthari never found them all. The species will survive, Captain. We made sure of that. As the quantum field finally stabilized, Corinth felt a presence approaching from the edge of the system. A single ship, small and utilitarian, broadcasting human identification codes. The crew was unenhanced, unmodified, representing the baseline humanity that the collective had sacrificed themselves to preserve. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the colony ship New Dawn," came the transmission. We felt something change. The nightmare stopped. The screaming in subspace went silent. Did we win? Corinth's response carried the weight of an entire species transformation. Yes, Captain. We won. The Velthari are gone, their enslaved minds liberated, their bionetwork destroyed. Humanity is free. The silence that followed was profound. Then, from the colony ship came the sound of weeping, not from grief, but from relief so profound it transcended language. "What about you?" Captain Vasquez asked. The quantum signatures were reading, "What did you become?" Corinth considered the question, his consciousness touching the minds of hundreds of integrated humans who had chosen transformation over extinction. They existed now as something between organic and digital, individual and collective, human and post-human. They had become guardians of reality itself, protectors capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of existence. "We became what we needed to become," he replied. "We are still human, Captain. We will always be human. But we are also something more, something capable of ensuring that no species will ever again enslave human consciousness." The New Dawn began transmitting coordinates of the surviving colonies, and soon the quantum network detected dozens of other ships emerging from hiding places throughout the outer systems. Humanity had survived, scarred but unbroken, ready to rebuild from the ashes of their former civilization. The quantum collective would remain, existing in the spaces between dimensions, watching over their species with the patient dedication of guardians who had transcended death itself. They had learned to harness forces that existed beyond conventional reality, becoming protectors capable of ensuring that humanity would never again face extinction. As the last Velthari bioship was consumed by the quantum cascade, its enslaved minds finally free to join the cosmic background radiation, Corinth felt a profound sense of completion. They had done the impossible, not just surviving the extinction of their species, but evolving beyond the need for mere survival. The war was over. Humanity had won. And in the quantum dimensions where consciousness could exist without flesh, where will could reshape reality itself, the transformed defenders of Earth stood eternal watch over a species that had learned to split atoms before it learned to split the difference between victory and annihilation. In the end, they had shown the universe what happened when you threatened a species that had conquered its own planet before it reached for the stars. You learned that humans were capable of conquering concepts themselves, including the concept of their own limitations. The last transmission from the quantum collective echoed across the liberated systems, carrying a message that would be remembered for millennia. We are human. We adapt. We overcome. We transcend. And we never ever surrender.